Look, YouTube has changed, and I can prove it. So far this year, I've uploaded 264 videos across my clients' personal brand channels. However, I also happen to lead YouTube strategy for a private equity firm. And so I have access to the back-end YouTube data behind hundreds of huge channels across almost every niche. And across all of that data, the same small handful of things is working, but it's working really well. In 2026, when you upload a video to YouTube, the system reads the metadata, so your title, your thumbnail, but more interestingly, it places a bigger emphasis on your transcript. And so unlike this time last year, when you upload a video and you have 0 views on it, YouTube has already filed it somewhere. It already has an understanding of what your video is about and made a guess about who it is for. And so the first thing you need to be paying more attention to right now in 2026 is which neighborhood YouTube is filing your content into. Take a look at these 2 videos which we posted on Chris Bumstead's channel. Now, these were both made within the last 2 months, but one of them is pushing 3 million views and one of them is just at 190,000. And the main difference between these 2 videos from a packaging perspective is that one does something that we call entity signaling. And so the first title is "You are not tired, you are just comfortable." But the second title, "This morning routine won me 6 Olympias." Now that term morning routine is something that in their documentation, YouTube refers to as an entity. Look at these 2 other videos because they do the exact same thing but on this channel here. So once again, both of these videos posted within the same year, but one of them is using entity signaling. The man who taught Mr. Beast to go viral. The specificity there is in that high interest term or name, morning routine or Mr. Beast. In both of these examples, the videos that performed poorly were generic and vague, but the ones that performed well were concrete. They were about a very specific high interest term, something that already has hundreds of other videos around it. Imagine a coffee shop in New York. One that looks super generic. It's got the same chalkboard outside. The branding looks the same as the others right next to it. It maybe only has 2 stars or so on Google Maps, but it will always have a queue outside it. Hold that thought for a second, because now I want you to imagine an incredible bar, one that stands out in every single way, just completely unimaginable. Maybe it makes amazing coffee using coffee beans that have been grown and engineered manually in a lab somewhere deep in Alaska. And all of the baristas are former models and actresses, but none of that matters. The coffee shop in New York will always have more customers, and that's because there is existing foot traffic. Those entities from earlier, Mr. Beast, or the idea of a morning routine, these are subjects that have years of watch behavior behind them. And by building YouTube video ideas around those themes, you are inheriting an insane amount of data that YouTube can use to classify what neighborhoods those videos are actually in. Whereas with those vague versions, YouTube has to classify those videos from nothing. Now, if you have a huge audience, you may be able to get away with this because YouTube will develop their understanding of what your video is actually about from the behavioral data of viewers who watch and click off at certain points. But it can take months for that to accumulate into a meaningful signal that YouTube should try pushing it to a different audience, and by that time it won't matter anymore. Specificity is what shortcuts this algorithmic placement. You should never withhold the specifics. Always mention the authority, or the tool, the trending terminology, or just the most common way of describing a subject. And in 2026, if you follow this, you will get enough impressions for your video to be shown to your dream audience. This will put you on the recommended page. But that's not enough, because if your viewer doesn't click, then it means nothing. Every one of your videos must have a reason to exist. Look, this is going to sound super strange at first, but every single one of your videos now needs to have a reason to exist. And what is that reason? There are 2 parts to every perfect video idea in 2026. There is something which I call the anchor, and the anchor is the familiar part of your video. So maybe it's a familiar topic or a familiar problem that people already care about. But then there's the bet, which is your unique perspective or approach to it. Now, after hearing about this, trust me, you won't be able to unsee it. Every single video that is now being recommended on YouTube has a very clear anchor and a very clear bet, and it is the balance between those things that makes a video good. Take a look at this video titled "The Book That Fixed My Attention Span." And so the anchor is the common goal that people want to fix, of fixing your attention span. But the bet is that it's one specific book that is what's doing it. Here are some other examples. So I'm a doctor with ADHD, how I really focus. Now the anchor is the common problem of how to fix your focus with ADHD, but the bet is that it's a doctor who's giving the advice from her experience. The anchor here is the common problem of how to focus if you have ADHD, but the bet is that the advice is coming firsthand from a doctor. And that is what makes it different from any other ADHD focusing video. But your anchor doesn't always need to be a problem. And so take a look at this video. How to make a $1 million website for your business. So the anchor here is just a website tutorial for businesses. The reason that this video did well and was pushed by YouTube is because it runs 6 hours long. That's what makes it different from other videos about how to build a website. Each of these 3 videos has something that makes them entirely different than the rest of the niche. And for all of these, it's very easy to explain what the anchor is and what the bet is. The anchor is something people already care about, a problem they already know they have and they're already looking for solutions to. Or it's a topic they are already interested in, or an authority they already care about. But it's not limited to those things. These are the 8 ingredients behind any video on YouTube. Now your anchor can be any one of these, and so can your bet. For every video you make in 2026, you need to choose one of these ingredients to be your anchor. So understand what your audience is currently watching, find something all of those videos have in common, and choose that. That is the building in New York you're going to open your coffee shop in. That is the high foot traffic plot of land. But then you also want to choose one of these ingredients to be your bet. You can get away with choosing the most boring topic in your niche and spending no time on ideation at all, as long as one of these ingredients is doing something that nobody else in your niche is doing. In other words, YouTube in 2026 is a game of finding something that people already care about and then bringing your unique perspective to it. Okay, so now you're on recommended pages and you're even getting clicked on. But having good title and thumbnails just isn't enough on YouTube in 2026. Everyone knows about outlier ideation theory. They're all watching Ed Lawrence and Alex Hormozi talking about YouTube strategy. The thing that's actually undervalued right now is the watch experience. Look, to be completely honest, I'm paid stupid amounts of money to go through retention data, some very influential people. I mean, I was the head of operations for one of the largest YouTube companies in Europe, working directly alongside Kwebbelkop himself. I've even had conversations with the Dalai Lama about YouTube strategy. And what a lot of these YouTube teams have in common is their entire understanding of retention and engagement is trying to find the cliffs in your retention chart. Those small, sharp drop-off points. But these don't hurt you. At least anywhere as much as this silent killer. Any damage done is usually because of a long, gradual slide, just a consistent and straight drop in retention. And the reason why this is seen as a huge problem to the YouTube discovery algorithm is that there's nothing individual in your video that is to point at and blame. They see this as just general boredom. Viewers are just clicking off at random points in between 2 timestamps, and because of this, the algorithm knows it can't just find a different audience for your video, because anyone who sees your video is just clicking off during that part of your video. Here's a retention graph for a video I posted just 2 weeks ago, which is currently at 2 million views. There's a lot of data here, and here is exactly what I'm looking for. So the first thing is to block out the general sections, and so instantly there's a huge drop off during this introduction here. Now I'm not sure what timestamp this is, but that looks like it goes on for quite a lot longer than most intros I've seen. We then have this slight bump at this point. We then have this slide down at this point before our video flattens out slightly over here. We then have a more gradual negative slide at this point. So what I want to see is essentially what happened during these points individually and what happened during this flat part of the video. Clearly, this is what viewers felt like they came for or wanted to see, and these are segments we should avoid having in future videos. So what I'll then do is actually watch through the video and try to understand what the ongoing tension or feeling of progression was at these points. Usually what happens is this was the payoff, and at this point the viewer felt like they had no other reason to stick around. A gradual slide tends to be for a lack of payoff rather than something that's just simply putting them off immediately. Now I want you to ignore all of the small peaks and the small bumps. These aren't things that are at all helpful to look into. Focus on the major sections and what is going on structurally. This slide during the intro starts before the first point of the video arrives, and so we could have instantly fixed this just by bringing this start of the first section a bit earlier and cutting that intro slightly shorter. And this is just one insight that could have gotten this video hundreds of thousands of more views within the first week. And when you're doing this to every single video you're working on, that compounds. It can become very, very impressive, and it can build some very, very impressive numbers scarily fast, especially because people just aren't paying attention to this anymore. The main thing that retention tends to trace is something called the rate of new information. And so it doesn't matter if your video is full of really tight cuts, and it doesn't matter if you're speaking super fast. What does matter is that you're saying something new. Now, this isn't just new in the context of your video, obviously you don't want to be repeating points, but it's new in the context of your niche, especially if you're a newer channel. Any impressions being given to your video are by viewers YouTube is highly confident will enjoy your video. The YouTube discovery algorithm is very risk averse, and because of this, for those viewers who have been recommended your video in the first place, almost always they have watched hundreds of other videos similar to yours. In almost all cases, their watch history is packed with hundreds of other videos just like yours, and so they have seen most of the information this space has to offer, and in their minds they have a pretty accurate mapping of the generic information being given. And so actually saying something new consistently over a prolonged period of time is the actual lever that will improve your attention and something called your viewer satisfaction, which is directly what YouTube tracks to decide whether to push your video further. And now on to the final point, which, to be completely honest, I think is the most exciting part of all of this. Look, getting views in the first place only matters if those viewers come back. Regardless of what your goals are with YouTube, maybe if you're trying to nurture prospects to then sell an offer, or if you're just trying to build a huge audience for YouTube ad rev, all of the highest ranking engineers who work on the YouTube discovery algorithm have publicly stated that what YouTube is trying to optimize for is returning viewers to your channel. And to do this, you need to give your viewers a consistent and recognizable anchor to come back to. Okay, so go to your YouTube studio and go to the analytics tab here on the sidebar. You then want to find the section titled Audience by Watch Behavior and hit See More. What you will see is a really helpful view of a breakdown of your channel over the past 28 days in terms of new viewers, casual viewers, and regular viewers. Now, if you're not what we call a one of one, then your channel will have no reason for viewers to come back to. And so you'll have a very, very low percentage of regular viewers and only a slightly higher percentage of casual viewers, with most of your views by far being new. It is very easy to collect one-off views, but it is so much harder to get viewers to come back. But that is the game in 2026. But what I found is that there is a way you can actually engineer this. Think about Hormozy or Sam Ovens or even Cole Gordon. All of those names are instantly recognizable. But when I say those names, you definitely don't just think of a single video. You think of their brands as a whole. Topics on YouTube are commodities. Anyone can make a video about a certain topic, and to be honest, anyone could even get views on a certain video about a certain topic. Now, remember, that is the anchor part of your video that we talked about earlier on, but the part of your video that nobody can copy. That's your bet, that unique perspective to that anchor. And for this bet, you need to make it something only you can play, but something you can play over and over. And this exactly is why so many of the videos that did super well for me in 2026 were videos where I wasn't optimizing anything on a video level. I was thinking about the brand. I spent that time instead thinking about the positioning of the brand as a whole. Hormozi, Sam Ovens, and Cole Gordon all have very interesting ways of approaching topics. Often they'll use specific examples or show specific cases. They also have a very unique style of talking and a unique toolbox of explaining certain themes. These are skills they spend their off time building constantly. But you have skills too. I mean, maybe your unique perspective is your identity, having maybe a certain job that holds an authority for a certain audience, like being a doctor, making videos about how to focus if you have ADHD. If you have one ingredient that you can consistently use as your anchor on any video you make, regardless of topic, then that becomes your brand. I trust that any video Hormozi will make will use stories of conversations he has with business owners, or certain case studies and examples he goes through day to day running his company. And so this final step is more about creative direction and building this long-term asset that is your brand. And that is the whole funnel. That is what's working in 2026 so far, because if you're focusing on single videos, then you may eventually have a video that gets a lot of views. You're just scratching your lottery tickets until one of them hits the jackpot. But your positioning as a brand as a whole, the collection of videos that you're continuously working on, that is what people come back for, and that is what your brand is.